Madam Speaker. I'm here this evening to talk about the recent flooding in the Fraser Valley, and in particular in the Sumas Prairie area. Now, the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, or his Parliamentary Secretary, will be well aware now of the dimensions, the extent of the damage, and the estimated cost for repairing. Somewhere between $339 million and $580 million to seismically upgrade the Sumas Prairie diking system and the Mansqui Prairie diking system. And probably about that much money again to pay for repairs that need to be done to the damage caused by the recent flooding. But tonight, I want to talk in particular about another aspect, and that is the American impact on the flooding on the Canadian side. So the Nooksack River runs in the U.S., and it, just like the Sumas River, breached its dikes during the floods in November. But that water, just for by way of reference, north is downhill, and that water ran into Canada. Now, Canadians have said, good neighbors don't flood their neighbor's property, and Americans say, well, good neighbors don't actually block the natural flow of the water, and that is the natural flow. As one American official is quoted in the Vancouver Sun as saying, you're not going to argue against the lay of the land. Sumas Prairie is a lot lower than Everson on the American side, and that is absolutely true, Madam Speaker. Sumas Prairie on the Canadian side used to be Sumas Lake until about 100 years ago. Our pioneers there decided to build a dike around it, cut in canals, put in pumping stations. They pump Sumas Lake dry, and it's become very, very productive farmland now. Fixing the Canadian side is going to be the easy part. That's roughly $1 billion. Fixing the American side is going to be much harder from an engineering perspective, but also from an international relations perspective. The Canadians are hoping that the Americans will improve the dikes and the levees on the Nooksack River, but there's, of course, downstream risk for the Americans for that. What the Americans prefer is a natural floodway northwards across the Canadian side of Sumas Prairie to the Fraser River. They're already buying up farmland for that, and if that happens, that's going to have a devastating impact on the Canadian side. A lot of very densely populated, very productive farmland is at risk here. So my question to the government is, what is the government doing in negotiating with the U.S. to come to a sensible solution to what looks like to be a very serious international impasse? Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Queen's Privy Council and to the Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. In response to the Honourable Member from Langley Aldergrove, I will start by saying that our thoughts remain with the families of those who have lost loved ones and all those affected by the floods, landslides, and extreme weather conditions in British Columbia last November. Our government recognizes that this was a flooding event in extraordinary scale and scope. While the full cost of the event have yet to be determined, the Insurance Bureau of Canada has estimated the insured damages to be at least $515 million. And we know that climate change is making these kinds of events more frequent and more severe than ever before. In fact, Madam Speaker, the President of the Queen's Privy Council and the Minister for Emergency Preparedness traveled to the province just earlier this month to survey the rebuilding progress in some of the most severely affected regions, including Merritt and Abbotsford, and spoke directly to those whose homes have been impacted. The minister saw that the people of British Columbia are working hard to rebuild their lives. However, we agree with our honourable colleague that there's much more work to be done, not only to build back from this event, but to create more resiliency into our infrastructure and communities to mitigate the impacts of future disasters. And we have made a commitment to British Columbia and those impacted by these floods that our government will be there for them during the rebuild. That is why our government has formed a joint committee with British Columbia to work alongside Indigenous leadership on immediate and ongoing support. Through this committee, we also discuss how we can enhance climate adaptation and response measures to better prepare communities for future events. Improving infrastructure resiliency was one of the top priorities the committee set out during its first meeting in December. The Disaster Financial Assistance Program, also known as DFAA, remained a key component of how the federal government offers financial support to provinces in the aftermath of those kinds of events. To speak to the effectiveness of the program through the DFAA, the federal government has paid out over $6 billion in post-disaster assistance to provincial and territorial governments since 1970. Madam Speaker, as I have previously confirmed to this House, the government of British Columbia has submitted an initial request for support under the DFAA for November's flooding. Our officials are working together with their provincial counterparts to move this request forward. As we continue to work with the province on rebuilding from this disaster, we also continue to work on a number of measures to better prepare for and respond to weather-related events of all kinds. In 2019, we collaborated with federal, provincial, and territorial partners, Indigenous communities, and municipalities to develop the emergency management strategy for Canada. This strategy sets out common priorities and areas for action when it comes to helping Canadians and their communities better predict, prepare for, and respond to natural disasters. Through Budget 2021, our government has allocated funding to complete flood maps for high-risk areas in collaboration with provinces and territories. Budget 2021 also provided an additional $1.4 billion in funding to expand Infrastructure Canada's Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund and to support projects such as wildlife mitigation activities, rehabilitation of storm water system, and restoration of wetlands and shorelines. Finally, Madam Speaker, several ministers have been mandated to collaborate to develop a national climate change adaptation strategy and invest in reducing the impact of climate-related disasters, including flooding. I thank the member for his advocacy on this issue on behalf of his constituents, and I look forward to working with him as we develop solutions to better protect his communities and the rest of British Columbia. Thank you very much.
For Langley Aldergrove.
Well, of course, we in the Fraser Valley are grateful for support from the federal government in funding reparations, repairs, and also enhancing infrastructure to adapt to climate change. But my real question is today, what is the state of negotiations with our American counterparts to make sure that the Nooksack River specifically, which drains Mount Baker in the North Cascade Mountains, what is the state of those negotiations? Because we cannot solve the problem on our own. Fixing the Canadian side is the easy part. We know exactly what needs to be done. It's just going to require money and a lot of energy. Want to know what our relationship is with the United States in that matter. Thank you.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as the member opposite knows, that we, of course, work very closely with our American partners. In this instance, what's important that we also work very closely with the province of British Columbia. As I mentioned, that we have formed a joint committee with the province to work alongside with Indigenous leadership on immediate and ongoing support, but also better understand the future steps that needs to be taken in terms of adaptation from a climate change perspective, in terms of infrastructure resiliency. That would also, of course, Madam Speaker, would involve talking about cross-border issues. And I'm sure with the help of the member opposite, I'm working with our colleagues in British Columbia, we will be able to come up with solutions that work best for all our communities. Thank you.
The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Oh, thank you very much.